Welcome to another session of Interviews in Development Finance. This is where I take advantage of everyone's reduced travel schedule because of the pandemic to speak with members of the development finance and impact investing community. Today, we speak with Vineet Rai, Chairman and founder of the Aavishkaar Group, one of India's longest-standing impact investors. Thank you for watching. So Vineet, thank you very much for participating in this series. My first question to you is regarding impact reporting. I recently participated in a webinar where you spoke and you mentioned something about impact reporting which caught my attention. You made a quote along the lines that if you had a rupee to invest in impact reporting, you'd rather invest it in the entrepreneurs and the companies that you back instead of the reporting. And this is an interesting observation because we in the development finance and impact investing community continue to have a dialogue in terms of what are the impact reporting requirements that we require for our own institutions, but what is also reasonable for the fund managers that we work with. And you know, Aavishkaar has been around for quite some time, and you've worked with several different types of institutions, and you've been exposed to various requirements in terms of impact reporting. It would be very interesting if you could share that experience with the viewers today.
Thank you for inviting me, Florian. Aavishkaar has been reporting its impact for almost 10 years now. So I think probably we might have the longest history of measuring and reporting. But the big question that I continue to ask is, what are you measuring? As an impact investor, our job is to identify an entrepreneur, screen his business model, then give him money and nurture him or her to build a scalable business. The belief is a scalable business which is an integrated impact should be able to deliver significant impact and significant returns. Now, we have a measurement of return because we return the money to the LPs and distributable proceeds, and the MOIC and TBPI defines it. How do you define impact? As far as I'm concerned, as an investor, my role ends in identifying the business, so at the start of the business. The entrepreneur's impact is actually a different different question altogether. So for me, what is important is making a distinction between an impact investor's impact and the entrepreneur's impact, and that's how Aavishkaar reports its impact. The second question, which I think probably people, while they're measuring, they're probably forgetting, is impact is contextual. An impact should be seen from the eyes of the person being impacted. And because it is contextual and because it is seen from the eyes of the person impacted, we will all have very different impact calculations. So somebody sitting in Switzerland would see impact very differently from somebody who's a migrant labor in India, or somebody sitting in Mumbai like me. So our all impact theses are different, and that's actually very important for people to take into account. Finally, there is so much demand for money to nurture entrepreneurs to create impact. Therefore, if money has to be spent, and if I have that money, I would rather spend in what I am good at, which is actually creating impact, rather than what I am not good at, which is measuring impact. And those who want to measure impact should invite very large institutions or large consultancies or large audit firms to come and measure impact. We are very open to be measured, but if capital is available for me, I would rather use it to make impact. Thank you so much.
My second question to you, Vineet, is regarding impact and what does that mean and to whom? You made a quote the other day where you alluded to something along the lines that if a farmer in Bihar is receiving capital, his perception of impact is different than, let's say, an institutional investor here in Switzerland's perception of impact. And that's a very good point because in the impact investing community, there still is a lot of debate about what are our perceptions of impact and to what extent should we as asset allocators be imposing those perceptions on the impact fund managers and the end users. Could you share with us a little bit your experience having to deal with this challenge over the years?
On the context of impact is very important for me personally. Now, if you start looking at impact, there are 4 players whose context matter. LP has a vision on impact, the GP has a vision on impact, the entrepreneur has a vision of his or her own, and then the beneficiary, the producer or the consumer has a vision of impact. Now, whose impact or whose vision of impact we are measuring? Uh, the impacts are contextual because what you see is right in Switzerland may be different from what I see in Mumbai because I have a very different tradition of coming up. But my entrepreneur may see right as very different. And then my beneficiary may see right as very different. For example, and this is actually the most amazing part of it, is that the LP may want actually the money to go in certain place. We as GPs know that it is going to be incredibly difficult, so it will take much longer gestation. But the LPs have a time limit, so they want to see significant impact made in low-income states within a certain time limit. To go and invest in low-income states, you will have to create companies. If I go and do that, I will need a longer time. If I take a longer time and there is a broken ecosystem, my exits, even though I may create a great company and make significant impact, my exit returns might be lower or on a risk-adjusted basis, or my time horizon will be lower, which means the IRR will fall down. The beneficiaries who are actually in UP, Bihar or low income states may actually like it or may see it differently. The entrepreneur may have their own position. They say, I want to work with poor people. Why should I actually go in a remote part and do it when I can do a much more scalable, technology savvy thing in Mumbai, because there are far higher density of poor people in Mumbai than it is in other places. So there are very different ways to look at it. How do you reconcile these challenges? To me, one of the best ways to reconcile is to the LP should be very clear what they are seeking from GP. Are you seeking the GP to create a new company in a difficult geography? Are you seeking a GP to find a company that is actually already profitable? So whether you are looking at a venture capital strategy or a private equity strategy, or are you looking at actually a IPO as an outcome, you need to be very clear. If I have actually seen a discordance in somebody like me trying to claim that I would go and create companies, not necessarily rhyming with a lot of LPs who are probably looking at a 5-year horizon for me to generate an exit. And this kind of discordance, which can be created, especially when in the DFI community, given that people change. So when I sign my contract and an understanding, the policy was to go to low income states. When I am actually doing the exits, the policy is to look at technology driven investments. Now, how do I reconcile and convince even despite having PPM and documents, that the business that I was asked to do is very different from the policies, because it's a long gestation thing. So I think I, as the GP, should be trusted by the LP in understanding my limitations, and the LP should also recognize that their internal change of policies should not actually make the GP suffer. Ultimately, impact is the basis of any impact is trust. The beneficiary should trust me, the entrepreneur should trust me, the GP has to trust the LP, and the LP has to trust GP. If the basic trust is actually challenged, I don't think so we will be able to create the impact that we are seeking.
So Vineet, my last question is about trust and the trust gap. Because there are a lot of people who are passionate about impact, and I'm talking about in North America and Europe, and who have access to capital and have the ability to allocate capital to impactful investments in markets such as India, across Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America. But one of the challenges that these people have is, how do they bridge this trust gap, that their expectations for how the funds will be used will actually be used and allocated in that manner? In your experience, having been working with institutional investors for such a long time, do you feel that there is maybe some quick wins that people who are trying to mobilize capital to impactful investments can do to bridge that trust gap?
Florian, I think this is a very interesting question, and I think the easiest way to find a meeting ground in this gap that exists between what the LP expects, what the GP does, and whether the real impact happens or not, is we need to actually clearly understand the definition of impact investing. Now, every business invested anywhere makes an impact. And I think the distinction today between what is impact investing and what is investing is almost gone. There's almost no boundaries left. The second thing is actually been also a challenge that has come largely from GP community, where we actually claim that you can make impact and deliver the returns, which means we say you can have your cake and eat it too. And almost everybody in the world knows that's not true. However, because of the challenge that everybody is faced with, we have accepted this falsehood as the truth. And I think the LPs have to also recognize that delivering a 20% return and going and creating companies in extremely difficult geographies is going to be unrealistic. Asking us to put, expecting returns of that kind is not going to be real. At the same time, the GPs have to also stand up and show a spine. They have to actually communicate honestly what they can do and what they cannot do. Yes, we all aspire to deliver a 20% dollar return, but then there are far too many other variables that are playing into it, and that will focus you away from making impact. Can we generate significant returns? Yes, you can generate significant returns, and you can sometimes do it while generating significant impact, as has been demonstrated and shown in financial services and microfinance. But can you replicate the same thing in agriculture? Can you replicate sustainable agriculture specifically? Can you replicate the same thing in waste, water, sanitation, health, education? Yes, in some cases you can, in some cases you can't. Where you can, most of the mainstream investors have started playing a role. And therefore, the question that I would ask the GPs and the LPs is, you can actually be a mainstream investor without trying to calling yourself impact investor. But if you call yourself as impact investor, it is not just the measurement of impact, it is the creation of impact that one should focus on. And I think LPs should start asking, how are you creating impact? Because buying a share in a company like Unilever or in Tata's can also create significant impact. And if that's what we need to do, then we should do it. It is a much safer and value accretive option in making impact than actually to go and do very difficult things in difficult geographies and then being measured with a person who's actually investing into a very evolved ecosystem. I think that differentiation, if it is acknowledged from both sides in a fair, transparent and honest manner, and probably if we lift the bar, and I think, Florian, you are doing that in some sense, you're trying to lift the bar of engagement. I think it's a very good move, and the more we engage and the more we talk, it will make a difference.